Stay away from my husband, you uneducated loser. That's what Sophia, a former classmate, sneered at me once. She's a woman who looks down on me for being a middle school grad, boasting about her Harvard degree. What really got under my skin was not just her attitude, but the fact that she was trying to take advantage of my childhood friend, Chuck. For the sake of Chuck, with his straightforward nature, I had to expose her true colors no matter what. I steeled myself for the plan I was about to execute. Understood. I'll pass that on. After parting ways with Sophia, the bride, I waited at the wedding venue for the right moment. All the pieces and information I needed were in place. Having received help from various people to get to this day, I had to make the operation a success. As the groom's speech began, Sophia, the bride, changed color and rushed out of the venue. I followed her, determined to do what needed to be done. My name is Kyle. I'm a middle-aged man, turning 40 this year. Raised in a typical household, I went straight to work for a company after graduating from middle school. I had wanted to attend high school, but due to our financial situation, I had to give it up. This was because my father was deceived by someone and ended up in debt when I was in 8th grade. To repay that money, both my mother and I had to work. There was a time when my father was distressed, my mother was worn out, and our home environment was at its worst, but somehow we managed to get through it. Our family didn't fall apart, perhaps due to various strokes of luck that allowed us to repay the debt within a few years. One reason was selling a historical painting found in my grandfather's storehouse, which brought in a significant sum. But another piece of luck was having a childhood friend like Chuck. Thanks to Chuck pleading with his father, Michael, I was able to work for a slightly better paying company than a typical business. Chuck was a middle school student just like me at the time, but his father owned a large corporation, which is why I was helped by them. It was sad to have to work right after middle school, but these strokes of luck allowed me to get back on my feet. Chuck has been a great help to me, and we've had a long relationship since we were kids. He's a friend I wish all the happiness in the world. To me, Chuck is not just a friend but also a junior colleague. This is because he went on to Harvard after high school, and then he chose to join a company where I work. I once asked him if he felt any discomfort about the hierarchy among peers, to which he replied, "You're a good guy, man. You wouldn't unfairly bully a junior, right?" Chuck trusted me without any doubt, saying that. When I heard those words, my heart warmed. This must be what a true friendship is all about. He continued, "Besides, I won't work at my dad's company. If I did, everyone there would go easy on me because they know me, and there'd be no tension in the work, right?" Chuck's father runs a pretty large enterprise, but Chuck was clear about not wanting to work there. He was doted on by his parents and everyone around him growing up. But he didn't approve of it, so he chose to work at my company to change his environment, even though it would have been easier to stay at his father's company. Because of this, Chuck faced many failures in the beginning due to being in an unfamiliar environment. However, he learned quickly, absorbing everything he was taught and growing rapidly. Now, he's even more competent than me, his senior. I admire such a friend and respect him deeply. So, I was looking forward to continuing to work hard together, but it seems like there's some trouble brewing for him. Just before lunch break, while I was doing office work at the office, Chuck approached me. With his thoughts clearly written on his face, he let out a sigh, looking quite melancholic. Since Chuck works in the same office as I do, we often chat during work hours. He's a serious guy, so it's usually about work, but today seems different. Chuck, cautious of others' eyes, started talking to me. "Can we talk about something during lunch? Is that okay? What's up? Is there a problem? It's not about work, but about my personal life, you know, that matter." Hearing his hesitant words, I had a hunch. He must be troubled about his fiancée. He has a fiancée, with their wedding just around the corner, but her behavior has been somewhat concerning. She's been reckless with money and has had a wild love life. Recently, she even tried to borrow a substantial amount of money from Chuck, claiming she was broke. Chuck refused, but she's been pressing him for it ever since. For you to bring up personal matters during work, it must be serious. Well, we had a bit of an argument when we met yesterday. Chuck, usually straightforward, speaks his mind without beating around the bush. It's unlike him to be this troubled. He must be facing a significant dilemma. Resigned, I braced myself and focused on the documents on my desk. I'll rush through my work, so let's meet at our usual spot during lunch. Even if I don't finish, I can always do it later. With a resolve to solve my dear childhood friend's problem, I got down to my paperwork. Lunch break was approaching, and it was doubtful I could finish everything, but whatever remained could be deferred. Fortunately, I had just cleared the most urgent tasks. Thanks, man. I feel a bit relieved now. See you at lunch. Jer, see you soon. It must have been about half a year ago when I heard Chuck was engaged. I was surprised that he, who had never been involved with women, had found someone. Perhaps due to his playful and mischievous nature or his older-looking appearance, Chuck had never been in a relationship before. Although he seemed to have a desire to marry, no woman seemed to see him as a potential partner. Such things depend on fate. Neither I nor Chick's other friends, all decent people, ever thought he lacked appeal to women. So when he, who used to quip, "Imagine staying single for life," found himself a fiancée, I was as thrilled as if the good news were my own. I told him, "Don't ever let go of her hand," encouraging him. I was thrilled at the thought of my precious childhood friend getting married, having children, and building a happy family. But when I heard the name of Chuck's fiancée, Sophia, I became worried for him. Sophia and I were classmates in middle school, and she was not someone I'd recommend as a marriage partner. Back in middle school, Sophia was known for her extravagant spending, quickly burning through her allowance and gambling with friends. In high school, she dated multiple men, causing trouble. That's why I was concerned Chuck might end up in a bad situation. I hope my worries were unfounded, but the situation seemed grim. Chick's expression when we talked about Sophia earlier was particularly gloomy. What came to mind was an incident that happened a few months ago. It was on a day off. 3 months after learning about Chick's engagement, I was on a train to go shopping. As I was about to go buy some hobby model kits, I noticed Sophia on the train. It was probably easy to spot her since there were fewer people around during the daytime on a weekday. It had been since middle school since we last met, but her voice and face hadn't changed much, making her easy to recognize. Dressed flamboyantly, just like back then, Sophia was adorned with numerous accessories. Sophia, pulling out her cell phone, seemed to be on a call with someone. Laughing, she was saying things like, "I got a great wallet, and I can buy so many things I like." I couldn't help but suspect she was talking about Chuck. Feeling uneasy, I listened in for more information, but the call ended too soon. Without any clear mention of a name, I was left uncertain. "What are you looking at?" Perhaps it was because I had been staring intently while lost in thought. Sophia, noticing my gaze, spoke to me. After staring at my face for a few seconds, Sophia exclaimed, "Aw, thought you were someone else, but it's just middle school grad Kyle, that poor guy who couldn't afford high school." Surprised, she started talking loudly enough for her voice to travel from one end of the train to the other, discussing things that invaded my privacy. The stares of other passengers, surprised by her outburst, focused on us. "Wow, why are you even on a train during the weekdays? Can't get a job because you're uneducated." She rapidly fired off one rude remark after another, looking at me with an expression that seemed to relish the fun. It was as if she found great joy in pointing out the flaws in people. "It's been a while, hasn't it? Anyway, don't start talking to me. I don't want to associate with the uneducated guy like you." Even though she had initiated the conversation, I was at a loss for words, and before I could respond, Sophia began preparing to get off. In a panic, I tried to ask her about Chuck, but unfortunately, the train stopped at her station before I could get an answer. After saying her piece, Sophia left through the doors, saying, "See ya," and descended onto the platform. Because of this incident, I couldn't help but think she was not a good match for Chuck. Despite reminiscing about the past, I managed to get through all my paperwork. Channeling my frustration and irritation at Sophia into my work seemed to have sped up the process. It was a subtle event that I don't know whether to rejoice about, and I couldn't dwell on it for too long. A few minutes later, it was time for my lunch break, so I hurried to the place where I had agreed to meet Chuck. I ended up at the rooftop of my company. As I opened the door leading to the rooftop, I could hear voices. "Why would you say that? I just want to invite my childhood friend to my wedding." Upon opening the door and looking in the direction of the voice, I saw Chuck, raising his voice at his cell phone. Since the word wedding came up, the person on the other end of the call was likely Sophia. It seemed they were arguing over something. Being laughed at for inviting a middle school grad to the wedding. Who would say such a thing? A person's character doesn't change based on their education. My opinion is absolute. Don't say stuff like that. Is graduating from Harvard really that big of a deal? The person on the other end of the phone must be Sophia, but I had no idea she had graduated from Harvard. I thought she seemed unintelligent because she was bad with money and had poor behavior, but it appears that was just my assumption. Intelligence didn't seem to affect one's character. Chuck continued talking to Sophia for a while, but it didn't seem to end well. He hung up with a disappointed expression. "Sorry for eavesdropping, but it doesn't seem to be going well. Is everything okay?" "Kyle, well, there's a lot going on." "Is the thing you wanted to discuss about the guest list?" Chuck nodded emphatically. "Exactly. I thought if you and Sophia could talk directly, any misunderstandings might be cleared up. She won't listen, and keeps saying no because he's just a lowly middle school grad." So that's what it was. "We've known each other for a long time, and I want you to celebrate my big day." Chuck looked down and murmured, "Do I lack judgment? I thought she was a good person when we first met." Chuck, unable to bear the sight of my downtrodden childhood friend, I looked away. Maybe I shouldn't be getting married. It didn't seem this way when we started dating, but lately, our differences in values have become more apparent. Taking a deep breath, I made a decision. My dear childhood friend was in trouble. I would do whatever I could to help. "Got it, I'll look into it," about her. My childhood friend Chuck has a wide network of connections. This is largely due to his father, Michael, who is well connected in various circles. Chuck, as a child, used to accompany Michael to social parties. It seems he was entertained by the adults there, which allowed him to meet a variety of people. Thanks to my association with Chuck, who has such connections, my own network has naturally expanded, which comes in handy at times like this. I'm thinking of leveraging that network right away. I began to consider various people I could turn to, including detectives and police officers. Since it would be difficult for Chuck to suspect someone, I need to be the one to take firm action. I resolved to expose Sophia's true nature and keep her away from my childhood friend. After reaching out to various contacts, I uncovered some truths about Sophia. Though expected, the revelations were quite shocking. I was about to share this information with Chuck, but he had come down with a fever. It seems he had been under a lot of mental stress lately, which likely led to his condition worsening. When I visited him, he seemed too ill to even speak, so I couldn't bring up Sophia's matters. I didn't want to add to his stress and potentially worsen his illness. So I decided to talk to his parents instead. After explaining the situation to Michael and his wife, I had planned to eventually tell Chuck, but the wedding day arrived while he was still recuperating. Chuck seemed to have recovered just in time for the day, but I was a bit worried he was pushing himself too hard. I wanted to meet him before the wedding, but my busy work schedule prevented that. Upon arriving at the venue on the wedding day, I was fortunately guided by the staff, who said, "You must be Kyle. The venue is this way." It seems Chick's parents had arranged for my entry. Inside, there were over 500 guests. While I'm not sure about Sophia's acquaintances, it's not surprising that Chuck, with his extensive network, would have that many guests. But thinking about him being the center of attention in front of 500 people made me nervous too. I made sure to look for certain people who absolutely had to be there. After discussing with Chick's parents, we had secretly added about 10 more people to the guest list without Sophia knowing. The plan seemed to be going smoothly, and I felt relieved. As I was waiting for the ceremony to start, a staff member called me aside. Wondering what it was about, I was unexpectedly taken to the bride's dressing room. There, I was greeted by Sophia, dressed in her wedding gown. "Chuck had been saying he wanted to invite you, so I had the staff look for you, not really expecting you to come, but here you are." "Well, it's fine. I'm in a good mood today, so I'll let it slide." "Do I need your permission to celebrate my childhood friend?" "Listen, people need to follow those who are more knowledgeable and smart. That's how the world works." Sophia's condescending attitude hadn't changed since the last time we met. "You can celebrate all you want, but don't get any more involved with us. It would be embarrassing to be seen with someone like you." She continued in a mocking tone. "A couple from prestigious backgrounds and a middle school graduate just don't match, do they? Stay away from my husband. You should know your place." I had hoped that if she truly loved Chuck, she might reconsider her words and actions after my warning, but it seems that's not the case. She doesn't love Chuck. She must have approached him for her own gain. This means I can proceed with the plan without any reservations. "Understood. I'll convey that message." "What do you mean?" "I'll tell Chuck that I will stay away from him from now on." "Oh, how surprisingly understanding of you." That's why my tone might have sounded a bit brighter. Sophia looked slightly puzzled but didn't press the matter further. After a few seconds, she waved me off with an annoyed gesture, saying, "I'm busy, please leave." Her confidence is only for now. Back at the venue, I informed Michael and his wife about the conversation. They looked disappointed, but time waits for no one. As the scheduled start time arrived, the wedding ceremony began as planned. The bride and groom made their entrance, and the staff efficiently moved the ceremony along. Thanks to the skilled staff, the event proceeded smoothly without any issues. Amidst all this, Chuck, the groom, began his speech. This is my first time on such a grand occasion, so I'm quite nervous. I'm not sure if I can speak properly, but..." Chuck, visibly nervous, started to share how he met Sophia, the bride, and their dating stories. Soon after, a murmur started spreading through a corner of the venue. Has he been unaware of her true nature? Sophia, are you planning to use him as well? Sophia, noticing the murmur, began to panic. It seemed that only then did she realize the presence of guests who weren't supposed to be invited. There were about 10 unexpected guests. All of them were individuals who had been negatively affected by Sophia. They had either been saddled with debt or had money extorted from them while dating her. They had willingly cooperated to unveil Sophia's true colors for this occasion. Sophia, grimacing at the insults thrown her way, looked desperately at Chuck for help. But Chuck, at a loss for words, just paused his speech and observed Sophia's reaction. Then, as a final blow, a recorded voice started playing throughout the venue. It was one piece of evidence gathered by the detective, All men are just a wallet to me. Just pretend to love them and use them however you want." This voice clip echoed throughout the venue for a few minutes. Eventually, Sophia, unable to bear the atmosphere, fled the wedding hall. Afterwards, a few people left the venue to search for Sophia. Feeling responsible for devising the plan, I also went out to look for her. Sophia, found crouching on a deserted road, was being confronted by the guests. "While you claimed to love me, you were only ever thinking about money. It was the same this time, wasn't it? You said friends should help each other, so pay back the debt you saddled me with." Initially, Sophia looked pale and frightened, but eventually, she defiantly retorted, "It's your responsibility for being deceived." I didn't want to exchange words with such a selfish person, but someone needed to take charge of the situation. I stepped forward. "I have discussed this with everyone here beforehand. If you don't want this to become a police matter, please apologize for all the trouble you've caused so far." I continued, making sure Sophia couldn't escape. "Everyone has agreed to forgive you if you promise to return all the money you swindled and pay off the debts you forced onto others." Of course, I hadn't had a chance to discuss this with Chuck, so that's a separate issue. "So you had a hand in this too, a middle school graduate, no less. Who is being cornered by this middle school grad, may I ask?" Sophia, biting her lip and glaring at me, reluctantly agreed to the terms after seeing the crowd around her. Though there was a chance she might renege on her promise, Sophia has kept it so far. Apparently, she didn't want to become a criminal. She has been living a modest life since then, without any support. According to the detective, she's been living in a shabby apartment, and her attempts at redemption don't seem to be going well. She appears to be living a gaunt life amidst her work-filled days. On the other hand, to save Chuck's face, we made it seem like the wedding disruption was planned. The story goes that Chuck, having realized Sophia's misdeeds, collaborated with his parents and me to hold a fake wedding. We apologized individually to those who attended the wedding unknowingly. I was worried about their reactions, but Chuck's acquaintances were all good people who laughed it off and forgave us. Of course, I also properly apologized to Chuck. It was an unavoidable situation, but I had cornered Sophia without telling him. However, Chuck forgave my apologies. "It was just bad luck. If I hadn't been sick, you would have told me, right? Then there's no need to be angry. Chuck is too good for me." I realized he's an irreplaceable and precious best friend. A few years later, Chuck got married for real. His partner wasn't someone with a difficult personality like Sophia, but rather a genuinely kind-hearted woman. As a couple, they embarked on a new chapter together. At the wedding, I was entrusted with the role of giving a speech on behalf of the friends, and I carried out that responsibility with great care. I genuinely felt glad that my childhood friend was able to find true happiness.